Excellent. Well, welcome everybody to our final in our Impactful OD series. And today we're looking at the question of organisation agility and normalising change. My name is Pete Lawrence, joining today from a wonderful city of Liverpool. And I work with AI Change Management, and Nick is obviously the director of Playcord. And between ourselves, we've put on 3 webinars, and this is the final one in our series. Really trying to get to the heart of OD being impactful when we're working with those that we are sort of have the privilege to. In our practice, helping in a way that they can appreciate, understand and value. So that's who we are, that's what we're doing. We're here for about an hour and 25, an hour and 30. So we've had the welcome. In a moment, Nick is going to give the provocation, which is the intervention, if you like, the thought input. And then that's going to lead us into small group discussions. We'll be in groups of 3 or 4 to go away and talk with our colleagues about the particular challenges and questions that Nick has praised for us. Then we'll come back for a short plenary and then and close. And the ones in the past have been really helpful, beneficial. So you'll get a chance to listen to Nick, but also then a chance to talk with your colleagues. And then when we come back in plenary, we'll have the opportunity to share around the room. And if you want to make any connections, please do that in the chat. And you can do that on LinkedIn or in the chat. And wonderful. Yeah, so thanks so much for being here. We really do value it. And Nick, over to you now to lead us in what is grandly called a provocation, but you're going to give us the food for thought, if you like, that we can chew over and then share amongst ourselves. Thank you.
Well, all right, so I'm going to talk a bit about organizational agility and normalizing change. And as with the other topics of this series, it's another big one. So I'm going to cover some of the insights, but of course, there's much more out there to learn and to research. So I think we all recognize that we've been operating in an increasingly global and connected world, lots of ambiguity, lots of uncertainty. If there's not hundreds, there's definitely thousands of books on Amazon and other good bookshops about how to normalize change and how to develop an agile organization. And that's because it's really difficult. It's complex work. It's the work that we've been called to in some respects. And leaders need to actively work on this. It's not something that you just do half-heartedly or do just once in the year, but actually it's an ongoing effort. I'm going to use a couple of case studies to highlight a few of the things that we as practitioners and as leaders need to pay attention to. But I'll also share a couple of models that I think reinforce some of that later on. So there is a report by Digital AI. They've done 15 of these. This is the 15th State of Agile report, and they identify a number of the Agile challenges. And as Dean Leffingwell, the co-founder and chief methodologist of Scaled Agile, talks about, he says, you know, everyone needs to operate with an Agile mindset, and leaders need to understand that this is a new way of working. And if you look at the right-hand side, the most significant agile adoption barriers, include everything from inconsistencies in processes and practices, cultural clashes, general organizational resistance, lack of skills and experience, the absence of leadership participation, and an inadequate management support and sponsorship. And the key challenges in that red box there is they've largely remained the same for the past several years. And these challenges are around, organizational culture and resistance to change, the lack of support, and skills continue to be problems. So so it really reinforces this first point that I'm coming to, which is that we need to remember that organizations are socio-technical systems composed of strategies, structures, processes, performance frameworks, job descriptions, and the like, but also about people, preferences, politics, power, group dynamics, behaviors, mindsets, and the culture of the organization. It's not just about throwing some training in and saying, well, there you go, or just telling people, do it this way, and suddenly it's all changed. So just like the cycle team, when we look at organizations, these 2 cyclists are actually just part of a wider organization. They're not the whole. There's mechanics, there's bike designers, there's material designers, there's a whole range of people behind these 2 competing. Yeah. And we need to look at the organization as a whole and understand it and understand the dynamics that are going within it and how we work with those. So the first case study that I'm going to highlight is this one that I was working with a little while ago. So a digital real estate organization. And I've modified some of the details. I've used some of the competitor imagery, so you won't be able to decide who they are. But they work across the whole of Europe. They've undergone massive disruption because the whole of the real estate market has undergone massive disruption. People have moved from paper into digital platforms, many of which just look like standard websites, but there's a whole host of technologies behind those, as well as apps that you can be connected to, and apps even on the websites and a whole lot of other stuff. And this is really driven because customers have really wanted immediate access to information. They don't want to have to go into an estate agent's or look through a newspaper and just get the cost of the house and the size of it. They want to get more data. They want to know what's the location like. Are they near the doctor's surgery? Are there bus stops nearby? Are the schools great? You know, what kind of schools are they? Does a house fall within the catchment of that school? And so there's all this information that people want to be able to discern which smaller selection of houses they want to go for. And of course, there's a lot of uncertainty in the market from the war in Ukraine, cost of living crisis and inflation really impacting the real estate market. But they recognized the need for rapid innovation and evolution. So the first point here is, this represents a water lily. And if you know anything about water lilies, they don't flower unless the environment is just right. They need a pH of 7 for them to really flower. And they need that cleanliness of water. So my first point of this case study is, as a leader, you need to create an environment in which your people can thrive, to feel safe and work within. So the real estate market, as I said, it's been disrupted. It's quite turbulent. It's also hyper competitive, with many organizations vying for supremacy. So what the advice that we gave to the leaders was that they need to remember that a key role of leadership is to create these islands of sanity. That's what Margaret Wheatley calls them, or Meg Wheatley rather calls them. It's about recognizing the power and influence that we each have, even if we don't have a leadership title. So this is about us and our compassion and our responsibility to create a healthy environment for our teams and peers. And by doing this, we give ourselves and our people a place to cope, a place to feel safe, space to experiment, a community to connect and to grow with. So what does this look like? Well, it may be as simple as working with your team and peers to create a structure for their working day. It may be seeking to understand and learn when things go wrong instead of blaming people. It may be role modeling experimentation because no one else is doing it. If you're the leader or the most senior person in the team, it may be about role modeling that experimentation, trying things out. It may be keeping conversations focused on what we can control and what we can do about it, rather than letting people becoming overly anxious about things that are outside of our control. My next point is, well, digitalization is happening anyway, so let's use it. Let's use it to develop the necessary change capabilities and capacity in our organizations. In the same way, when COVID hit, many organizations saw it as an opportunity to drive forward various transformational activities that they hadn't been able to get right in prior years. Of course, many had to enable hybrid working, and that was one of the things that really had to happen. But many others were able to use it for other reasons as well. So the leaders in the real estate organization used the disruption that they're experiencing to shift people's focus and to build the necessary capabilities within the organization, one of which was creating centers of excellence to champion the digital ways of working, and also to design and implement a rigorous agile way of working based on a calendar of events across the year. And that really drove the improvement of products and innovations. And I'm going to expand on that in a couple of slides' time. So they used it to really create the opportunities to deliver the changes that they needed to see within the organization. And leaders need to be able to take a systemic view as well, both within the organization and externally, to understand how things are aligned or not. To consider how the organization is working with the partners and how they're going to serve them better. So this may be about building collaborative working within to deliver real impact for their customers. Internally, it may be that they used multidisciplinary squads composed of sales, marketing, user experience designers, product developers, platform developers to deliver their products. While externally, the business would collaborate with partners who could offer complementary products and services on their platform, such as offering credit score checks and affordability calculator, mortgages, and insurance products. And so it's about collaboration and thinking about how to enable that collaboration, creating those spaces and opportunities where collaboration is necessary, but not overdoing it and saying, well, everyone must collaborate all the time, because that's not necessarily true in all organizations or all parts of an organization. I've got a couple more points on this particular case study before I move on to the next one. The first is about the innovation imperative. So to stay ahead of the competition, organizations really need to industrialize experimentation and innovation. So this image here is a generic innovation pipeline that represents this particular real estate company. And so they applied on the left-hand side where it says A, they applied analytics and data science. They gathered information from competition, market research, thought about their own strategy, what was happening with their customers, really understood their pains and gains, worked with their data engineers, and kind of pulled that all together to give themselves a real great insight of what's happening in the market and how they need to respond as an organization. That led them into creating their strategic pillars, or BHAGs, or big, hairy, audacious goals, their strategic pillars, their OKRs, their objectives and key results, if you don't know what OKRs are, and thinking about their product themes. And that allowed them to think, okay, are we going to continue investing in this current product and service mix, or are we going to make some new bets? And some of these new bets may be completely new ideas that need to be scaled up. They need to be tested before they even become products themselves. And of course, there'd be continuous improvement, run fix sort of stuff that would continue. And then that would lead to the product technology map. And so underpinning this innovation imperative is my second point. And it's about, it takes huge discipline to operate an agile organization, particularly around speed of decision-making, data-informed decisions, and resource redistribution. So for leaders, it's about having the discipline of a learning mindset, creating the environment, sometimes designing that environment, which welcomes both experimentation of trying new things and operational excellence to do things to Six Sigma levels of performance. And so it's that discipline that's required to manage that polarity between delivering today's business as well as exploring tomorrow's, and coming up with ideas that you need to scale that may fulfill tomorrow's needs in a better way than you can do today. So my next case study is from the pharma field. And I've been working with a global pharmaceutical company. And of course, the pharma industry, if you don't know much about it, it's been disrupted in the past few years. A lot of their long-term blockbuster patents are coming to an end. Sales has shifted online, particularly driven by COVID. The government, particularly the UK government, but other governments have also doubled the tax rates on branded drugs. There's increased personalization in medicines. New medicines that are being developed from first principles tend to be focused on smaller cohorts, and from shifting from selling medicine to delivering outcomes. And so there's a real recognition for the need to normalize change, aka increase the organizational agility. They had already developed a training program with a target of around about 70% of the organization to be Scrum trained by the end of 2022. But they knew that they needed something more than that. And so when we undertook some of the diagnostic research, we realized from the feedback, we asked them what are the top things that they needed to do more of or less of, and some of the stuff that came back were about subsidiarities, so authority being delegated to lowest levels, a clarity of focus, what we're really doing as an organization, what is my team doing, what are we accountable for, being consistent and having coherence in terms of the approach that they used, being really outcomes focused as opposed to the management being on top of them around how they're delivering the work, and then focusing on the most important things. And so we created this conversation, a series of conversations with them in a range of interventions. And this slide represents some of those conversations of what needs to be worked on. And ultimately, what they're trying to deliver is satisfied customers, a good employee experience, and business success. And as you can see, that forms a bit of a pyramid. And at the bottom, we've already mentioned improved accountability, but they also knew that they needed to create that space for experimentation and improved innovation. They also noticed that maybe they didn't have the right people. They did have some, and they wanted to retain those. They didn't want them to leave for the competitors. And there's quite a talent war going on between the various pharmaceutical organizations. But they also knew that some people may need to leave the business because they just couldn't operate in that way. And so they needed to have the right people. And one of the things that drove that was this preference for execution. They really needed to just have a go at things and try things out, rather than just having lots and lots of conversations. And what they found is many people, their day was just filled with meetings, but they never actually did anything. They just talked. And they said, well, that's not really what we're about. We're here to make a difference for our patients. And so we need this preference for execution. And this preference for execution needs to be connected to the prioritization and being really clear on what is the focus and what we're trying to achieve. Coming back to that point again around ambidextrous organizations, they talked about an adaptive organization, one that can see what's coming down the pipeline in terms of the market trends and how they as an organization needed to be able to respond to that. And then needed to understand what was going on in the market, sense what's going on, feed that information into the right decision makers and make some very quick decisions. And I don't know if you've heard the best Jeff Bezos quote about 70%. And he talks about making a decision with only 70% of the information that's available, as opposed to waiting for 100%, because the opportunity will have passed you by if you wait too long. And you can always course correct. And so that need for increased decision making. And then, of course, increased collaboration, working between the different functions. They found that they weren't working coherently as a whole. They were working in silos, and so they needed to work in a more of a collaborative manner. And the iceberg on the right-hand side there really just kind of reinforces and highlights for them that training was not enough. They'd been trying it out, and they knew that the training just wasn't going to do it. It wasn't going to make a transformation to the whole of the organization. It made some difference in some individual teams, but they needed the whole organization to change. And so reinforcing what I've said before about that systematic view and working together and realizing that normalizing change requires a whole system response. And so it begins with them as a community, not just as leaders, but them as a community to make sense of, to build a shared vision and to affect real systemic change. So that's been a couple of rapid fire case studies highlighting a few key points. And some of these points I think are highlighted in the two models that I'm just going to touch on here. And these slides will be shared with you, of course. So this is a model by Linda Hobesch. And at the heart of it, you can see there's 4 quadrants. agile strategizing, agile implementing, agile linking, and agile people. And the agile strategizing relates to those points about the wide, deep scanning and understanding of the environment that you're operating within, and really understanding your customer purpose and having the clear insight on what their needs are. But also making that strategic commitment as a whole organization to agility. And then around agile implementing, I talked about Six Sigma levels of delivering today's business, lean processes and continuous improvement, but also experimentation and testing and learning from setbacks. So that would be about that ambidexterity, as you can see there. And the agile linking. Again, this is about collaboration and conflict management. It's about connecting across your whole supply chain, working with suppliers and your various communities that you're supporting and customers that you're working with. The agile people, it's about values-based leadership. It's about creating those islands of sanity and a healthy organization for people to thrive within, having those adaptable structures and meaningful roles. And then the next one is a series of agile routines that Professor Chris Worley talks about. And you can see some of the data on the right-hand side of this slide, where he researched a range of organizations, both in North America and the European Union. And his research highlighted that those organizations that demonstrated more of these agile routines did better. In essence, they performed at a higher level. So as you can see in the North America, for those organizations who through more of the agile routines, they performed 7 times or had 7 times more likely sustainable performance over the long term relative to their peers. And again, in the European Union graph, you can see there an improvement. And so these 4 agile routines, I think, again, just reinforce what Linda Holbasher said in some of the case studies that I've shared. Strategizing, it's that aspirational purpose, a widely shared strategy, which it enables and manages the climate for execution, and prioritization, being able to say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to focus on these few things. So that real focus. I talked about sense making and making sense and understanding what's going on in your market. And Professor Chris Worley talks about perceiving, continuously monitoring and communicating the environmental perceptions to decision makers to interpret and make a suitable response, and so on into testing and implementation, of course. This really comes back to us as people and as leaders. And as Gandhi says, if you want to see a change in the world, you need to be the change. And I really like this slide on the right-hand side about how to be an agile leader, no matter what your role is. And there's 4 things that you can do, maybe 4 things you can try out from tomorrow if you aren't already. It's about modeling that learning culture, being committed to learning, rather than blaming, seeking out why things happened and understanding that, and seeing what can change to enable and embed that learning into the organization so that you can perform at a high level. Having people focus over process. So celebrating the intelligence of the collective and working collaboratively with others to unlock their genius. And then to responding change, to let go of the plan and to listen, to examine, and to respond in the moment to what is really needed. And then, of course, evolve your mindset to be comfortable with uncertainty instead of letting it block your success. So those are 4 things that an agile leader can do. Whether you call yourself a leader, whether you've given yourself or someone's given you the title as leader, these are things that we can all do to create that space and to create islands of sanity, as Meg Wheatley says.